how things are installed. Basically, you can have the best product, but if things that happen in the field finally when the system is coming together is for sure very, very important as well.
Not just scale and repeatable quality, it's also being close to the customers and developing partners, going the ways they go, being on the spot together with them. And that's also part of this scale effect and scalability of the setup.
Welcome to the 8th and final episode of PV Unplugged, where we've been tackling the burning issues facing the solar industry today. And over the past few months, we've been exploring really the biggest forces that have been shaping solar reliability, from the industry's early pioneering days to materials, digitalization, sustainability, and standards. Today in episode 8, we're stepping back and asking the question, what have we learned about building solar assets that last, and what still needs to change? I'm joined by two people who have lived this industry evolution firsthand. Eric Ast-Comoli, the global head of OEM business Renewable Energies, and Matthias Mack, Vice President Renewable Energy from Stäubli. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with me on the pod today. Welcome to PV Unplugged.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having us.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Matthias.
And Matthias, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you with us. And you've been watching and listening to the episodes over the last few months, the first 7 episodes. What's been your reaction to some of the themes, some of the discussions?
Of course, it was very interesting to listen to those episodes and to these people participating here. I think we learned a lot about the challenges of the industry, which is right now in a transition. But I was also surprised to hear that much about financing, IRR rates, and bankability topics on one hand, and this may even increase in future. And the second thing was also regarding quality aspects, for instance, long-term sustainability and reliability of the processes, but also the products itself. So this kept my attention.
Yeah, financial themes as the solar industry really matures and becomes a major kind of infrastructure asset are becoming more and more important. Eric, how much do you think the discussions that were had across the 7 episodes reflect what you're hearing from the industry today?
Oh, I think very much. I mean, what struck me was some of the examples that were mentioned. If technology shift, when that happened from multi to mono, and then from PERC to back contact. So this has been just facts, real things that we do experience in the industry.
Yeah, we can talk about things kind of in theory or from a distance, but a lot of our guests were really hands-on practitioners over the whole evolution of the modern solar industry. So it's been great to get those perspectives, those kind of boots on the ground experience. And one of the first guests, well, actually our first guest from episode 1 really has a very long history in the solar industry. Renata Egan is the executive director for the Australian Centre for Advanced Photovoltaics, and she's got a long history in industry and also at the UNSW. Renata joined Eric and myself in episode 1 to really discuss about the role the global market has evolved, or the role of the supply chain in the global market during these periods of rapid expansion that we've all experienced. And I asked her the question, how important have partnerships been between firms across the globe in the development of the modern solar industry? So let's hear from Renata Egan.
It's absolutely critical. The nature of the industry is that it's a global, there's a global market. There are global players contributing to the industry, supply chain, including in the equipment manufacture. So equipment from around the world is going into the manufacturing lines in China. The Chinese industry is improving and developing its own supply chain around that sector, but there are still some key industry players that are irreplaceable in the supply chain. And that includes the Stäubli connectors. Part of that goes to identifying a niche and delivering a really quality product that's hard to replace in the supply chain. So it's really interesting because the supply chain and the industry is huge in China now, but it relies on a global market, but it also relies on global players in the supply chain to make it work.
Okay, Renata Egan from the Australian Centre for Advanced Photovoltaics on episode 1 of PV Unplugged. Eric, we discussed a lot about the early days of the solar industry during that episode. And Renata in that clip was really talking about this huge scale, this massive throughput that the industry now achieves. Are there lessons from the early days that can be applied to this really mass manufacturing era?
Sure. So, back in 2010, 2011, when we were first visiting those factories in China and seeing people were still trying to figure out how to scale the business, and if you see now, I mean the volumes that are produced, and if you look at our connector, for instance. I mean, the volume produced and the design of the product has been from the beginning done in that way that we could scale it, and I think this is not happening by accident.
But the scale also brings with it challenges as well, right? When there are small mistakes in production, and this was another theme brought up in one of the later episodes. We're not talking about a few kilowatts of production. We're talking about megawatts of production, just huge numbers of volumes of modules in the field.
Yes, and some might potentially try to cut corners or achieve cost reduction through small saving and cutting corners, but typically then we'll see the impact of that in a bad manner, and it's something that's obviously at Stäubli we have been pretty much focused on maintaining the quality. This has always been our first priority. And
maybe also fitting to what he said, another important factor is not just scale and repeatable quality. It's also being close to the customers and developing partners, going the ways they go, being on the spot together with them, and that's also part of this scale effect and scalability of the setup. Huh?
Yeah, and as Renata said, researchers and universities also play a role of that, industry players internationally and right across the supply chain.
And well, we always listen carefully and worked very well together with the universities,
research institutes,
and technology drivers, and they show a lot of passion, of course, and we try to make it happen, what they recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's look at durability and bankability, and like your comments earlier, Matthias, about the impact of the financial community and their demands and their requirements for kind of driving durability in solar assets. Our guests for episode 2 of PV Unplugged were Adele Zhao, the head of marketing, product and service for Europe and the LAC for Trina Solar, and Will Hitchcock, the founder and CEO of Above. My co-host was Andrea Viaro from Stäubli. And we really, dug into this theme of bankability versus cost reduction, or whether that is really a dynamic that should be playing out at all. Now, Matthias, if you think about this dynamic, how challenging is it for the solar industry to continue down this path of cost reduction while also trying to deliver long-lived assets?
Well, it has been said in the episode, or we will hear it, every single cent counts. And this is what we hear very frequently right now from all of our customers, especially from the OEM sector. But it's also interesting that in terms of installation, utility installation or CNI, there is a lot of progress in terms of keeping or increasing the quality level to meet those standards we see right now from banks, from insurance companies. to meet certifications, for instance, and to make sure the quality standard and reliability of the installation itself is high and going for the full expected lifetime of more than 35 years in some cases.
Well, let's look at how that's playing out on the ground and hear from Adele Zhao and Will Hitchcock from episode 2 of PV Unplugged.
I think you already mentioned about it. So we have, as an industry, we have huge cost pressure. So we have to do lots of cost down. One is on the component level, but also at system level. So, and extremely competitive market among the component supplier, but also among our customer. So, and then how to maintain the high quality as an industry is definitely, I think, one of the biggest challenge for the industry. As we know, solar power plant, at least for the module warranty, minimum is like 25 year, usually now go for 30 year. How do we make sure a real durability? Because today we have to do all the tests in the lab, but how to simulate that in the long run. So, and to make sure we have energy security everywhere in the future, because in 30 years, majority of the power, the energy source will be renewable. So will these power plants still be very functional with high quality, right, in 20, 30 years? So with the current cost structure, how do we keep the assets very healthy in the long run? I think definitely it's the biggest challenge.
So I think within the construction space, the opportunity is there's a need to increase the amount of oversight and supervision of all the activities going on site. So I think what we're seeing is an increased use in other approaches to monitor the construction QA. So QA mustn't be something that's just done at the end of a project. It's got to be built into the whole construction process. Because these assets are so large and you've got huge teams of subcontractors that might be unskilled or, they're nested subcontractor entities involved in a project, you've got to be really hot on quality assurance throughout the build. Otherwise, you end up with this kind of drift. If a methodology isn't being followed and you don't catch it early, then you've got thousands of components installed incorrectly. So that the kind of oversight piece is a massive challenge because these sites are so big. So what we're seeing there is the use of things like aerial construction monitoring and better digital tooling throughout the construction process. This is often kind of nested in with what was the more traditional owner-engineer scope. So that's definitely one thing that we're seeing to kind of address this need. But it is a challenge. Getting skilled labor into these projects is a real challenge for the rate we're trying to grow as an industry.
Will Hitchcock and Adele Zhao on episode 2 of PV Unplugged. Now, Eric, when we hear from Adele in that clip and on that episode, you can really feel the challenge. It's a very big challenge that the module manufacturers have faced over recent years. Can you give us some insights into ways in which cost reduction can be achieved, performance increased, while also balancing long-term durability?
Sure. Yeah, I think Adele described it very well. I mean, the cost pressure on the model makers, but it's affecting basically all OEM suppliers or equipment suppliers on one end to provide cost reduction, but as well as extending warranty. She mentions like customers to expect like 30 years warranty and. At the end, important, and especially in the financial model, is to consider your capex, the amount of money you invest into your plant. But people should not neglect the potential OPEX at the end, which is then key to reach the financial yield and model you had for your system.
Solar isn't purely set and forget, which again is a theme we'll explore in a later episode. Matthias, Will Hitchcock was talking about, quality not only in components, but also how that can be executed in the field. How did that resonate with you?
He also mentioned, one of his comments was, if the cost pressure is getting too high, quality assurance and quality will be cut in the process. And this is, of course, worst case, which could happen if you all like to have a long-term stability and a well-working system. And when we specifically look to a component business, cable harnesses and this kind of products, then it's mandatory that it's starting with the planning and the factory inspection with a very well-defined OEM process, production process. The quality of the product itself is important. But what we figured out is, of course, then finally in the field, there are so many challenges really to do mistakes and to avoid these mistakes while having unqualified staff due to cost pressure, but also due to availability of the people in those areas we are talking. So no proper tools, for instance, for installation. So really shortcuts to get things done, and this will have a negative effect on the overall outcome. Probably just recognized after 3 to 5 years when the first warranty period is over.
Yeah, you can have high quality components, but installed incorrectly really don't perform and last the way they should.
We see also the industry has been growing to a crazy number of markets and above 1 gigawatt. We are talking about roughly like 50 countries and with different maturity level in designing the system and installing the system. And this is all been well summarized by Adele and Will, I think. And Matthias' comment is very, very true, and should be also our role as manufacturers in the industry to educate, to continue to train, to support people in all those emerging countries and markets.
Well, designing and constructing assets to last 25 plus years was the topic of episode 3 of PV Unplugged, which we'll address now. Our guests were Jörg Althaus from Intertek CEA, Madeleine Hill from Everose, Dreykus de Roo from Sinovoltaics, and my co-host was Dominic Borghi from here at Stäubli. Eric, when you hear numbers like 20, 25-year warranties, even 30-year warranties, and then project lifetimes are meant to be 30 plus years, how realistic do you think that is?
I think it's challenging in different ways. We've seen numerous changes in technology over the course of the last 10, 15 years. If in the cells, if in the modules, but also the system level thinking and how the system or design has been developing. We mentioned that earlier. We see more and more markets in different regions, in different climates. So I think it's quite challenging, and for sure manufacturers, companies such as Stäubli should really consider to test beyond the norm and be close to all those markets.
It also may require much more service activities in the field over this of the full lifetime here, and probably in combination with more digital predictive approach, for instance, to be ahead of possible failures, which is, I don't think it's the case right now. Even everyone is talking about that. So this needs to be closed to arrive there.
Okay, well, we will be hearing from 2 experts in this field of digitalization very shortly. But first, let's hear from episode 3, Jörg Althaus, Madeleine Hill, and Dreykus de Roo after this.
Right, for those who know me, I've been in the quality assurance business for 2 decades and a bit more now. And one astonishing thing to me is that we kind of still see some of the things I have seen early on, which is, for example, issues in the lamination, tiny bubbles forming around the edges of the modules or at the outlets where the junction box is coming. It just requires careful lamination process control. And that has become harder with glass modules that we see these days. So that's one thing I still keep seeing, or we still keep seeing. The other thing is that maintains an issue is soldering. It's the weak point, and it's also the most critical point where the cell strings get connected into the junction box, because you have the full power, the full current, the full voltage. And if a soldering point is not done well, the risk for a thermal event is real. what we see as a result is that bypass diodes or substrings are failing in the field. And finally, a more recent thing is with the move to TOPCon and the issue of TOPCon with dark storage conditioning is that the power measurements in the factories are more challenging and more error prone. And therefore, power verification is something that can be quite off these days.
And what we're seeing is that, solar, as you've mentioned, is this expanding market. There's a lot of growth. There are a lot of markets which have seen a sort of astonishing growth, and some which are really starting at the beginning now. And I think it's really critical that as an industry, we take those lessons from those markets that have really they've sort of seen it all in their geographies, in their markets. So talking about countries, particularly in Europe, like Spain, the UK, where we've got sort of like aging fleets of solar, and to really kind of take that knowledge and that learning and translate it into markets which are growing. And like you said, at Everose, we're working in lots of different markets across Europe. We're even out into Australia. And the joy of the kind of the teams that we have is that we really bring that knowledge kind of from one side to another, so across the technologies and across the markets.
Munich Re is a long-term partner for ours, and what you see is that insurance companies are very serious about qualifying factories. So the most common insurance is warranty insurance nowadays, but it's not that every factory can just get warranty insurance. Right? They go through a very thorough process of auditing, especially the technical side of a factory, fully understanding the technology and their capabilities before they commit to backing up their warranties. And especially in this stage where technology is changing very quickly, it's like technology is moving like a staircase. In the PV industry, like you take one step, and at some point it's a stable step. Let's say it's mono-PERC, and it's a very reliable, predictable, almost boring technology, right? And boring is good. Boring is very good in the PV industry, but it doesn't stay boring very long, does it?
Okay, Drijkes de Rooij, Madeline Hill, and Jörg Althaus from episode 3. Eric, watching back on that discussion, I think one of the themes was technology risk. We are a fast-moving industry, the PV one. We're always pushing to higher power output levels, to higher efficiency, higher voltages as well. How do you think these technology risks can be balanced as an industry when we have this imperative to keep growing, to keep getting cheaper and performing better, but at the same time we need to avoid costly mistakes?
I would say, and Jörg somehow describe it, with each new technology that has been launched and seen in industry, we've seen like new failure modes. I remember very well when glass models were first installed. Suddenly we start seeing PID that was just like popping up, and I think it's important that we just work as an industry. Because model makers do work on improving technology, inverters makers, but everything eventually affects how the system perform. And I think it's really important that we do work together, we partner together with all stakeholders in the industry.
Does the pace of change present a challenge? Because sometimes I'm struck by how quickly some technologies emerge. There's a little bit of discussion of, say, TOPCon, and then 2 years later, it's 80% of manufacturing globally.
Yeah, and this is what Drijkes also mentioned with the staircase. He was reflecting to always new technologies, then a sudden fast ramp up. And this is a challenge, but I also think the industry is maybe starting to learn and learning how this go-to-market process should look like. Same like we do on our side as well with the components. We have of course to follow this new technologies, higher voltage classes, different climate applications, for instance. And you need to be sure before launching a product that it's tested, that you know what are the borderlines of the solution itself, and if you are able to produce it finally in a high volume, scalable production. And well, that's a challenge. But the big and the very well known players, they know it already, I would say. Even if we see a lot of issues right now.
Well, as Matthias, you mentioned, digitalization has become a major theme within the PV industry, both in production, but also in monitoring and understanding what's really going on within a PV power plant, and perhaps taking preventative measures to deal with problems as they occur. And that was very much the focus of episode 4 of PV Unplugged, looking at how data can be used to inform decisions. Our guests were Govinda Upajai, who's the CEO of Smart Helio, and Jyoti Jain, the head of software product management with Next Power. Dominic Bergu was again my co-host. Now, Matthias, when you look at digitalization, how big is the promise to boost reliability of this data and how we use it?
Like we see also in daily life, AI-driven solutions. We all expect a lot of efficiency gains and quality increase and a better life and from that. And I think it's totally the same thing for the PV installations. And in reality, it looks like we are not there yet. There is obviously a lot of data around, and we don't know yet how to use it in a proper way. For instance, to improve it. But this is just a question of time, and will come anyway, probably sooner than expected.
And the power of big data in this kind of diagnostic capacity was certainly discussed in the episode. Let's hear from Govinda and Jyoti now.
I think it's beyond that, Jonathan. It's a very nice question, why we need even AI right now, right? I think a couple of years back or 5 years back, we had a very linear business model. We have to install a solar plant. Solar plants were less in number. They were young, new. They will perform and then have to sell to a user at a fixed price or a market price. Now look at the complexity of the system. Assets are much more bigger, much more complex in a sense that they have tracker, they're bifacial, they are older, they have some vegetation happening, all this thing. At the same time, you have batteries coming in. Your people changing, people are retiring from the system. Suddenly it's a non-linear system. More variables to take into consideration to take an action that I have to go and fix that problem or fix that underperformance problem. And I think this is where AI can really take all this complex information and simplify for us.
We do not want the industry to think of solar as, yes, it's, deploy it and rest assured that it will deliver the value, right? But I don't necessarily like deploy it and forget it. Don't forget it. You have to pay attention. You have to make sure it's producing energy. Right now there are people on top of it monitoring it, but can there be a comprehensive system that can monitor it and really utilize the people's time to make the most important decisions, right? That's how I look at it. I look at it as, increasingly advanced systems, monitoring it, acting on it real time so that people can focus on just taking the most important decision, deploying the resources where they're needed most, right? And I think that what we don't want is that we assume that you have built it for, 40 years, the equipment will last, and there is an operational budget for it that you just take care of it and you just can move on to the next project. You don't want to do that because then it will not live up to its promise. You have to make sure things are working. You have to inspect it. You have to fix issues. You have to make corrections and prioritize. And that's where I think software can absolutely help and needs to be taken into account. And in fact, maybe even go through upgrades like software should.
That was Jyoti Jain and Govinda Upajai on episode 4 of PV Unplugged. Well, that was a lot about digitalization. Do you have any ideas about what might be holding up its application? What might be delaying it coming into the industry in a very big way? What are the challenges?
I think the delay we are currently seeing is also related to what we discussed before. We don't know yet what to do with big data collected, but I think Govinda especially touched many important topics. He basically described what would be the benefit of collecting all those data. If he mentioned about people, let's say unskilled people, or people go for retirement, or if you're in a new environment doing that. He was also talking about additional criteria to measure this kind of installations, and because of the changed climatic reasons. So altogether here, I would say big data or digitalization really could help. Don't forget the product, don't forget the component. Usually on our side, we are quite satisfied if the connectors don't show up anymore over the full lifetime. But I think we need to think different, because it's not only a business opportunity created here, but we need also to offer service activities along the whole lifetime of such an installation, to pay attention to that, what you just asked for.
Yeah, and Jyoti also made the point that, we can think about PV projects as an evolving and changing thing. It's not so much set and forget, because the climate is changing. They are aging over time, as are individual components. So if you can monitor that project, you can make responses. You can make adjustments that will help it survive over the longer term. Okay, well, let's now look at the materials, the role that materials play. And I think this is a really foundational one in the solar industry, and one we've been having for many years. So it was really great to dig into it again. Our guests were Lucy Garreau-Illes, she's EMEA Technical Project Manager with DuPont, and Alessandro Andolini, the Solar and Photovoltaic Division Manager with Coveme. Eric, you co-hosted this episode with me, and how do you feel about how material innovation is keeping pace with power output?
Sometimes we see innovations, sometimes it's maybe lagging, it's sometimes slow. Depends also of some of the economics of the industry or the industry is facing. We see some moments where also many manufacturers are struggling, also financially speaking. So this is also maybe impacting a little bit the pace at which technologies is being developed. And then it's also how fast it could be adopted. Adopting new technology sometimes also takes time. And I think also we have seen that also with some of our product is how fast people are willing to adopt new technology, taking the risk to be like a first mover, or transparency on how reliable the new technology is, and really bringing the expected value and gains.
Well, we are in competition within the PV industry with other players, with other companies. So there's always a bit of a race to get some kind of competitive advantage. And sometimes that advantage is kind of realized in a fraction of a cent or a fraction of a percentage. So people sometimes take these risks. And it's a pattern that we've seen throughout the evolution, the development of the PV industry. And it was great with Lucy and Alessandro to revisit some of those earlier issues. So let's hear from Lucy from DuPont now.
In 2012, DuPont initiated this field inspection program, and it was really not very ambitious to start with. We were just on a fact-finding mission. And so I started inspecting, in particular, installations in Spain in 2012 and 2013, because Spain was much more open to say, oh, yes, we do have problems, come and see them. So that's the first place I went to, because they were culturally open to saying, yes, we have problems. And we started this program in EMEA because we thought there's older panels here. This is where we're going to see problems, right?
And Europe was the biggest market back then. I mean, it was representing 70% of the global market.
Sure. And it was wrong. I mean, we thought this is the most installed panels that we're going to see in this region. So this is where we're going to see defects first. And in fact, the older panels were showing us less material defects than newer ones. And the first thing I noticed when I went to the field in Spain first was that in 2012, 2013, the panels that were giving us problems were the ones that were installed in 2008. And then 2 years later, when I went to Italy in particular, I saw defects associated with 2011 installed panels. Can you recall at the time what that corresponds to? It corresponds to the boom of installation in Spain and the boom of installation in Italy. People were trying to install whatever they could find to install. And the growth of the demand was exponential. So obviously, there was also a very large panel of new materials that were coming online during those times. So we were seeing more defects, and we didn't know how to test for them.
Yes, actually, we try to investigate this matter since the beginning, this rush to enter a market with a new technology, mainly from the Asian producer, was immense. They changed technology and the scale of introducing this new technology was immense. I mean, compared to the past where the number were low, so you had some time to adapt and to research. Now there was not much research done on this new technology, and they started adapting glass because there was a misconception against the backsheet that top-con cells are for sure more sensitive to humidity, but this was related to the very first generation of top-con cells. And on the market in Asia, they start with one design and then massively they go and produce. There were not much glass production at that time, and then they required the glass as the first stage, and then the industry of glass started developing at a scale that is now unbelievable. So they started adapting this glass technology, and we are now seeing that there are several issues in the market, and also insurance companies are no longer willing to insure this installation, especially in some area where there is high hail impact, for example, or also due to the breakage that we are seeing. So we continue investigating, and we propose the use also together with glass, also with the backsheet, because backsheet has been a technology lasting for over the past 25 years and evolving in quality as well.
Well, some historical reliability and durability examples there, but also really one of the biggest issues facing the industry at the moment, which is glass breakage and this move to very thin glasses. How typical, Eric, would you say this glass issue is? We've seen this move to larger formats and then very thin, semi-tempered glass, and what have been described as big floppy modules. Are you surprised when you see developments like this?
I'm surprised, yes and no. We have seen that over the course of the last years and decades, that very often the question is what motivates this kind of innovation or new technology that has been launched to the market. Is it really a new technology, or is it a way to generate some cost saving and potential financial gains for the producer to generate more margin? Is it been really tested? How long has it been tested before being released to the market? Some of the comments from Lucy, based on the study that DuPont made, is striking. I mean, hearing that was not like the oldest models or the oldest plan that has been failing first, where some new technology that has been launched, and new technology very often equals like new risk, and so yeah, quite interesting discussion.
And it's also how technologies interrelate to each other or interact with each other. So, you can have the dual glass modules come into the market, and then you put them on trackers, and that adds a whole new level of risk. Also for EBOS components as well, trackers can introduce movement. So it's about how the different components come together and how that influences the risk profile of the project.
And this is something which could be really improved, the interaction between the different technologies and the different stakeholders, so that at the end, the overall quality of the system is increasing.
Yeah, through collaboration. Well, another way that durability can pay off for the industry more widely is in sustainability, because the most sustainable PV project is the one that lasts for a very long time. And that was the focus of episode 6 of PV Unplugged. We had a number of guests on this episode. Jens van der Laan, who's the co-founder of the Clean Energy Collective, Thomas Sauer, the founder and managing director of TechSecure, your own Belen Valeo, who's the division head sustainability and ESG with Stäubli, and Stefano Cruco, the founder and director of the So Powerful Foundation. And we really explored ESG in all its different aspects. The role, as I mentioned before, of durability and sustainability, the role of the S, the social part of ESG, and how solar can really pay off for communities, and also how companies themselves internally can adopt ESG principles and that kind of process of transformation. Now, Matthias, does this kind of messaging resonate with you about durability and sustainability?
Yeah, I think you mentioned all important ingredients for a good outcome here at the end. ESG, for instance, is for us, of course, very important. It's mandatory for the future, and all of our acting is towards that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you think there's an understanding in the industry that if they build projects and components properly, then that's actually playing a role in sustainability?
I think we are on the way, okay, as we can maybe formulate that. It's not clear everywhere. We talked at the beginning also some certain aspects where it's not so clear yet. But I think for the future it's a must, and we'll arrive there.
Okay, well, the financial community will also play a role in demanding ESG from their suppliers and from their project developers. And actually, in this episode, we also heard of a new and relatively innovative solution relating to quality and durability that Thomas Sauer is bringing into the market. So let's hear from Thomas now.
Yeah, that's correct. So what we have been coming up with is a technical rating system for not only PV power plants, but components. So it's a rating system that is built in a modular style, where we are looking at basically 3 different aspects. One is processes. How well are the processes established by a certain key player, be it a developer, a manufacturer, EPC company, or an O&M service provider whatsoever. So that quality management system will be rated beyond ISO 9000. And the second point is the actual product itself. How well is the product manufactured on the type, but then also for delivery in the field. And that's where I think is a really big point in matching, that what we buy is what we get. Yeah. So that is going to serve quite well, I believe. And the other one is, of course, then the construction phase that is supervised, so that, for example, you don't have mismatching connectors. You do the crimping right and all that. And I really appreciate Stäubli taking a lead on training or on that training initiative and also inspection initiative, because I think it's serving a very good purpose. So the rating is putting basically the context of a rather complex system. Not rocket science, as I mentioned earlier, and it's not whatever, a nuclear power plant, but it's still complex because it has a huge amount of single pieces, and puts that complexity into a 1 to 3 letter code that is very understandable for financial investors, insurers, and so on. So it basically helps for them to make an informed decision with a rating of AAA down to D, and gives basically the idea of, okay, I have a super good power system, or I have a relatively good one, so AAA, AA, single A, triple B, all that would be considered or would translate to investment grade. Then you would have double B and B basically complying with the standards and being safe, and C or D would be a system that we would not recommend investing in.
I think we just talked about the financial impact and making things easier across the value chain, right? And I honestly believe when we look at investors and asset owners, a lot of the things are down to how do we make this a reliable and a bankable asset. And by speaking their language, by creating this rating system, you do not only create something that's more easy to kind of, change hands between asset owners and investors, but it's also something that really helps us to, for instance, help insurers better estimate risks, right? And if we bring down, let's say, the paperwork loads or kind of the divergence in different qualities, then I really believe that this will help also to bring, for instance, premiums down, right? So Thomas, exactly. Thomas has mentioned this to me before, and I kind of also in speaking to companies in the industry, I talked about like what would need to be the benefit, for instance, for an EPCer, right? Imagine an EPCer being rated at a higher level. They could really be the ones getting much, higher quality assignments from asset owners, or asset owners getting a lower insurance rate on their project because they've done the actual steps in making sure they have a high quality project. So I really think this could work. And I think that's something that with the coming of AI and more digital tooling, that it's something that's also the right timing to now be introduced, although I realize that it's still a lot of work going forward and implementing this.
I think the industry has evolved to really understand the constraint. So understanding that when you are producing something, you also have the extended responsibility on that. So when we are talking about, for example, renewable energy, we are talking about a supply chain that also needs to extract minerals for the production, for the installations, and also you need to be allocated in some areas that maybe have some vulnerability in terms of biodiversity or social protection as well. So I think it's an evolving process, but as I mentioned before, like it's a complex aspect as well. And I think I see that in these years also there are becoming like more standards, like the Solar Stewardship Initiative, that I think is going to support a lot the sector to really have a standardization on what is important to measure, how we can go forward. But also that is a collaboration and should be a commitment from the different sectors and the stakeholders of the renewable energy.
So that's what we do with So Powerful in a nutshell, is to apply solar energy where the impact goes way beyond the energy transition, and it's really about energy access or energy reliability, let's say. We apply solar where it enables better healthcare, education, and access to water, which has different angles. One is wash, so it's about hygiene and sanitation. The other one is about irrigation and bringing down food insecurity.
Yeah, so it really shows that the kind of power that energy access can deliver. Olivia?
Yeah, in that context, of course, we talked also in the previous episode that, of course, in the industry, we see that a lot is somehow cost-driven, financially driven. How do you see that? What is your motivation, to do what you do?
So you mean personally, or personally, for what is what drives So Powerful? And
what drives you and the foundation? What is the motivation behind? Because as I said, we see in the industry there are asset owners, there are financial backers, etc. And of course, they focus mainly on finance, return on investment, etc. But in that context, sustainability, and you mentioned already, that with also bringing PV to some places, to some people, which will really help them also then to get access to water or education. So, but I know as well you've been in the industry for several years, also in other positions and with other companies. But what was also for you the motivation to focus more on, let's say, sustainability? What is really driving you personally?
We could spend an hour on that question alone, but let's say that indeed, if we look at Europe, where we have basically we have energy security, and of course this is under pressure because of many dynamics, but overall energy is not a problem. It's there, and we actually take it for granted. Yeah, So there, solar is amazing to enable energy transition. It's a wonderful and profitable asset class indeed, as you said. For a big part of the people in this world, energy is not for granted. Yeah, I think it's still about 700-800 million of people that don't have access to electricity, and that threshold lays pretty low. Yeah, it's about being able to power a few lights and also to charge a few phones. So with So Powerful, the aim is to use solar where it goes, as I said, beyond the energy transition and where it really enables these essential elements of life. Yeah, where it's reliable power enables better quality healthcare. Yeah, it can actually literally save lives. I can give an example of that later. Where it enables better education, so where kids can obtain better study results and basically have a better learning environment. And there's an amazing match with water, yeah, and electric pumps. So the more sun you have, usually the drier it is, and the more the need for water actually is. And there we enable clean water access, yeah, preventing diseases, saving people hours and hours of time per day, and much more. And where we enable irrigation and therefore, let's say, empower local resilience for communities where even in dry seasons, where usually hunger becomes a topic for millions of people around the world, they are better able to still practice agriculture, grow food where previously that is not possible. And then this image that we can put up now basically shows the example of just a few kilowatt peaks of solar in combination with electric water pumps, boreholes, and an infrastructure of water points can enable this is about 2.5 hectares of food growing, simply said, where literally the year before there was nothing. Yeah, it's one of the driest areas of Malawi in the dry season.
Now, when we look at ESG, it is a very big issue, Matthias. How difficult is it within organizations, within the solar industry, sustainable energy, to embrace sustainability, particularly within this competitive landscape that we've been talking about?
Well, first of all, it's, of course, a big challenge to implement it inside a company with, well, let's say, divisions, production sites, offices, key stakeholders. So that's one challenge. Of course, progressing very well, but the other thing is also to somehow get it in the industry started, accepted. But we see that, we hear that, we see a lot of insurance companies, banks now involved. They go for, let's say, a higher quality installations. We heard about this rating system. I think this would be a good example for a big step forward here to make it comparable and also to pay attention to the installed base of certain producers or project companies involved here. So these are important steps from my perspective.
Yeah, it's very much a kind of pull factor from the financial community, from investors, creating that demand.
And I think you should not just do it because it's a requirement, or it has been asked by the industry. We should just do it because we believe it's creating value, right? Value for our customers, value for the market.
Well, and there are baselines as well, such as the Solar Stewardship Initiative, which can really kind of set some boundaries by which the industry can measure its progress. And in fact, these kind of boundaries were the theme of episode 7 of PV Unplugged, when we were talking about standards and how standards and also training can help reinforce reliability. Our guests on the episode were George Kelly, Tristan Erion-Lorico, and Catherine Thijs. George Kelly is a secretary of the IEC TC 82. Tristan is from Kiwa PVEL. Catherine Thijs was from installation and a company called Green Vesting. I was co-hosted. My co-host on the episode was Guido Folberg, who manages standards here at Stäubli, and also Andrea Kobsch, who addressed the training part of the equation. Now, Eric, I always found as a journalist working in solar, when it came to discussions about standards, it was not always the most scintillating subject matter. It was not always the most stimulating, but it's incredibly important in terms of laying the foundation for the industry.
It is.
And do you think that one of the themes that we addressed was how standards keeps pace with the change of technology, this fast rate of change? How adequate do you think these processes are?
It's difficult, right? Because well, on one way, you can just adapt to new standards that have been published and released, or you just can accelerate because you believe the industry needs a new technology, and then just working forward and then making sure that the standards then do follow this new technology because you are doing something that would serve and create value and benefits for your customers and for the system. So yes, I believe that sometimes maybe standards are a little bit long to be adapted to new technology and requirements, and eventually we do need some fast kind of cycles, seeing how things are developed and released.
It's also important that it's very well balanced, as the people or the companies or the organizations who join or participate in the standardization process, it should be widely selected so that all aspects are covered, maybe not only the industry aspects, also the other aspects like social, environmental aspects.
Well, and it's also an opportunity for the industry to come together and collaborate as well, because you often have representatives from right across the industry. And it was a lively discussion, this one, I have to say, and, you know, some controversial takes about things like certification as well. So let's hear from our speakers, George Kelly, Tristan Arion Larico, and Catherine Tice from episode 7 of PV Unplugged.
I would say that a lot of engineers and developers don't fully realize what the actual situation on site looks like. For example, things like weather, tight spaces, or rough conditions have a huge impact on how work gets done. And installers don't always have perfect tools available either, which is sad, but it is the way it is. So even well-designed product can be hard to install if the real-world conditions aren't considered. For example, I had a brand new PV plant just built up, and I recognized lower energy output in one string. So I went there, and when I looked into the issue, and I was shocked to see that they had used the inside of MC4 connectors in the new Evo connectors. Didn't even think about that these are two different products and that there's no connections between there's a connection, of course, between MC4 and Evo, but if the inside of the connector is wrong, the connection is not like it should be, and the result is, of course, lower energy output, and even then other things.
I think it's mainly economic pressures, not only to, purchase less expensive components, but the manufacturing process. Modules are getting bigger and bigger because that's more cost effective for the factory. But then that really introduces some challenges in the installation. And I think the other pressure is time. Many of these power plants are on a very tight schedule, and so there's a lot of pressure on the construction people to do things fast and not necessarily right. And I think that's where we probably have a chance to make the biggest improvement is in training of those people who are doing the actual construction of the plant.
Well, let me precede my comments by saying I am optimistic about the solar industry, despite the pessimism that I will be talking about for the remainder of this podcast. So, no, I don't think we are getting the right balance. I was recently at a conference talking about PV module failures, and George just spoke about failures in the field from module installation. In our testing at Kiwa PVEL, formerly PV Evolution Labs, we're seeing failures of modules straight out of the box, and modules failing, like initially out of the box, failing the IEC/UL requirements for visual inspection. Like this isn't after stress testing. These are, we're hired as a lab to stress test the modules and see if they fail. But we're seeing an increasing number of modules that fail without us even stress testing. They're failing creepage distances, clearance distances within the module, creating electrical safety risks and frankly fire risks right out of the box. So I don't want to let the module manufacturers off the hook, because they're providing the warranty and they're responsible for ensuring their products meet not only the minimum requirements, but the industry and the buyer's requirements. But that said, if you're buying modules from companies that are losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year, which is what happened in 2025 with a lot of the big manufacturers, in some cases you get what you paid for. And you can't, the manufacturers are under too much economic pressure to build modules that are reliable, and that are going to last the 30, 35, 40 years that is being used in these financial models. So no, I don't think we have the right balance of economics and reliability currently. I think we can get there, but we need a quality reset in the industry.
Well, a quality reset in the industry. Tristan Arion Lurico from Kiwa PVEL. How much does that resonate with you? How accurate do you think Tristan is, Eric, in terms of that messaging for the industry?
Reset is a very strong, a strong message, I think, but for sure some improvements have to happen on different aspects. Well, what has been mentioned regarding the economics of certain manufacturers, and for sure the pressure you have to reduce cost, the way you select the product, the raw material to achieve that definitely impacts at the end potentially the quality, but I think the message also from George Kelly about how things are installed. Basically, you can have the best product, but if things that happen in the field finally when the system is coming together is for sure very, very important as well. So I think for sure as an industry, we all have to look forward in improving the quality of our product, but as well the way we train, we educate people on designing the system, on installing the system, and eventually also on doing like the operation, maintenance, and supervising the asset over the time.
Well, and that's why I think it was particularly nice to have Andrea Kopsch as one of my co-hosts for that episode, really focusing on training. And Matthias, Stäubli obviously made the decision to take training, part of the training of installers for connectors, into your own hands to make that investment. And was that very much what you were thinking, was we need to set an example here, we can make a difference?
Yeah. So we had quite a lot of examples why this decision on our side is really serving the customer needs and the market needs here. There was a lot of proof included here, and this also drove our decision to come up with that and to improve things and invest resources into this activity. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look forward now as a next step. We've got a lot of insights from the history of the PV industry. We've had some predictions for the future. But if we were doing PV Unplugged in 5 years' time, where do you think this discussion will be going? Eric, I'll start with you. What do you think would be defining the solar industry, but also these key issues of reliability, durability, and sustainability?
I think it will be more data and performance driven. What we see in the future, so companies and market participants will get used to it and used how to use it. big data as a topic we discussed. I also think that the whole topic around finance, which is of course totally related to that, will gain a much more bigger impact. And so with the final goal here to see installations really over the full expected lifetime. But there's also a slight chance that it's going the opposite, that let's say shorter periods, so that we may see shorter periods based on lower quality expectations. I think it's not finally clear yet, but this, of course, the first way is preferred by us if we could choose.
Sure. And we see also geopolitical tensions and all the situation that we have today, also with a lot of initiatives in different regions of the world to increase local manufacturing and those aspects as well. I think we on our side we have not been waiting for seeing this kind of protectionism or trying like to reshore production. If in the US, in Europe, or these different places, we have now for many years production in the US. We have production since the beginning here in Europe. We invested now in production in India, but it seems that that's also potentially a big topic for the industry to cope with. Huh?
And for sure, we may see also more certification rating of those big installations, like we also heard, and this is also coming together with an increased service activities. Also, maybe for not only for the existing ones, also in terms of repowering or refit.
Yeah, it could also be a sign of the maturity of the industry as well, getting these rating systems, getting some kind of more infrastructure around contractual infrastructure and financial infrastructure around PV projects. And it's funny you mentioned geopolitics, because even since a few months ago when we recorded the first few episodes of PV Unplugged, geopolitics have changed very much. So it's no doubt going to be a very dynamic landscape in the energy sector going forward. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining PV Unplugged episode 8. Eric Ast-Comoli, Matthias Mack, it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and it's been a pleasure having your company throughout the PV Unplugged series. Thank you for tuning in and watching, and we hope to have another series down the pipeline in the future one day. Thanks for your attention, and thanks for joining us here on Stäubli PV Unplugged.